Being a carer is becoming a more in-demand job each year. Wonderful strides in medicine has made life expectancy boom, and so full-time workers to help look after old-timers is a need. Sadly, not every person makes it to their end years fully intact. To put it politely, the woman I cared for unfortunately lost the marbles a bit. I look forward to the era where dementia is no longer a factor to how you spend the wonderful retirement years so many people look forward to. Her name was Sally, and she had a very young attitude. Literally. She was in the constant mindset that she was about 9 years old. One way or another, she would explain away certain aspects about her life. How she couldn't run with the other kids because they weren't nice to her. In reality, they were just creeped out at the old lady trying to chase them around. Why she wasn't in school, since they wouldn't let her enter. Or why she lived alone. But the delusions would keep up, day in and day out. I tried to help her break out of this mindset at first, but saw the futility over time, and learnt it was much easier to get her to cooperate by playing along. She would greet me like a favourite babysitter in the mornings. During the day, I'd take her around to do errands. Shopping was sometimes an ordeal. Her childlike mentality making her reach out for sweets and ice cream, often throwing a fit when she couldn't get what she wanted. It's a surreal experience seeing such childish behaviour from someone so old. The fun times were going to the park. We would go during the day to avoid the other kids, me knowing they were at school. She would waddle over to the swings and get me to push them. Sometimes she dared to try the slide, though after a few attempts she often claimed it was boring, though it was obvious it was causing her a bit of discomfort and pain. During our downtime, we'd talk a lot. Despite having the mentality of a kid, she'd tell so many stories about her life. She remembered a lot about her past, despite her failing memory, though you'd have to excuse the narrative as it was often told in the perspective of a kid, no matter the situation, even when it didn't make any sense. She'd sometimes make other people in her life kids too. Her late husband played the role of a boy in her school that she fawned over, the childlike innocence adding a charm to her tales. She would sometimes tell me stories about things we'd done together too, sadly forgetting that I was there when it happened. I didn't mind though. It was lovely seeing her so enthused and cheery, a rare sight sometimes when working with people with that condition. And it was nice hearing how much I positively added to her life. We got along great over the years. Through the troubles, I had figured out a lot about her. The only thing I couldn't piece together was a reoccurring event she told me about. During our downtime conversations, she'd sometimes tell me about a doll she played with. She would regale me with the imaginary adventures she had with it, often fairy tale in nature, which at first was fun to hear. It's hard to describe the interesting imagination of an old person who thinks like a child. It created a surreal mix of young and adult fiction. Imagine taking the tone of the first and last Harry Potter book and mixing them together. It was a concoction of narratives that she weaved together into amazing little stories, something I wished I had written down. What made them stand out to me was the time period. They often made current references, as if they'd happened not too long ago. This led me to believe she had a doll and created these fictions while I was away, rather than an old doll she was reminiscing about. But no matter how much I searched, I could never find the doll she spoke of. Whenever I'd ask her about it, she would tell me she played with her doll when I left. I didn't just try once to find it. It became almost a weekly ritual. While I cleaned her house, I'd keep an eye out for a doll or anything that resembled a doll. I found the broken top end of a mop, which to me looked like it could have been played with like doll's hair. I pointed it out to her, but she denied the correlation. I found some ripped up papers bundled together. I thought it could be used as a figure, but again, she told me I was wrong. Whether she was embarrassed or relished in keeping a secret from me, she never showed me what she played with when I left. Sally carried this secret to her grave. I was sad to hear, but one night, she peacefully passed away not long after I'd left one of my shifts. I was heartbroken. I'd spent the better part of 5 years getting close with her. She was a lovely client, and I didn't realize how attached I'd gotten until I got the morbid call. I ended up taking a good few weeks off to grieve, often travelling to our favourite spots and reminiscing about her. To the world, she was another grain of sand blew away in the breeze. But to me, she was part of my world. There was a small investigation, as authorities often have to rule out foul play. Sadly, not every carer is a good egg, and sometimes blame can be shifted to a person if negligence or other motives come into play. With this in mind, I initially wasn't shocked when I was contacted by the police to come in for an interview. When I arrived at her house, I was taken back by the scene. Police tape wrapped around the property, and a mix of formal investigators and hazard suit adorned figures moved in and out. After explaining who I was to an officer at the front, I was escorted into a room and interviewed. They started with pleasantries and a few inquisitive questions. I cooperated the best I could, and once they saw that, they jumped into the meat of what they were after. First, they asked questions related to little girls. I told them everything about her condition and went into great detail about her belief of being a child. I explained how I catered towards it and thought nothing wrong about encouraging this harmless behaviour. At this, the interrogators looked at each other and bluntly told me to follow them. They led me around the all too familiar property, now defiled by clinical forensic equipment and investigation markings scattered around the house. They pulled me in front of the closet, which I was familiar with. What I wasn't familiar with was the now open hole at the back of the walk-in. There was a crawl space that I'd never seen before. They told me in great detail that they'd found the body of a little girl. She was apparently decayed beyond visual recognition. She was also dressed up in an old-fashioned formal dress, something you'd imagine an upper-class Victorian girl to wear. I was silent at this, but what they told me next made me exclaim in both shock and realization. The child's joints were flexed a lot post-mortem, and despite the decrepit features worn away with rot, an abundance of makeup was plastered across her face. In their words, it resembled the look of a child's doll.